now recording. Good morning, everyone. As always, I'm Lauren Cook. I'm your Dean of College and Gap Year Advising at JCHS. Just a few more weeks left to go in the school year. Couple of housekeeping items up top. As always, y'all are on mute for now. Please stay there as we do. I have a couple of comments, and then we have our special guest star, Ms. Beck, who's going to talk to you for a little bit, and then we will open up for questions, both live and in the chat, whatever works for you all for the balance of the time. We are recording. I'll distribute to everyone as soon as it's up on YouTube. And as always, this is an hour-long program, so we will have a hard stop at 9. Ms. Beck will need to leave us a little before that, as she has to go on and teach at 8:50. And if there are remaining questions, college advising does not stop with graduation, so I'm available to you all summer. We are going to keep the conversation going. And just a couple of words from me. As we're back to school from Pesach break, I know that many of you went on college visits during that time. I've been hearing about it as I'm having my second one-on-one meeting with your students before we close up for the year. It sounds like there have been some good trips, some revelations, some reflections. Lists are being built, which is all what should be happening right now. And if I haven't met with your child yet, know that I'm about 2/3 of the way through the class, but in the next week and a half, I will wrap up and have spoken with everyone. We are also launching the college essay unit in all the English classes. So the at-level classes have started to work on some free write prompts and some journaling and testing out topics. The AP classes will shift to that next week after the AP language test happens. So I am making some guest appearances. I'm available to talk about topics with students. And keep in mind, if you haven't been through this before, that the topic a student may land on for their first attempt at a college essay may not be what they turn in the fall. A lot of times it isn't. It's certainly not in whatever form you may or may not see it in the next few weeks. Sometimes parents reach out to me and are a little freaked out about what the student initially wants to write about. Rest assured that we're just practicing here. And so whether you don't love the topic or whether you don't love the execution, we've got months of work to go on it. So take a deep breath. Let me know if you're concerned about anything, and know that we'll be working on this as one part of the long-term project the next couple of months. Had a class meeting yesterday with the junior class, and we had a couple of seniors come in and talk about what has just happened with their process. And they gave, I think, some great advice to your students. Some of the headlines that came up were to start early, meaning do work on this over the summer. Not all of your kids will follow that advice, but know that they got that modeling from the seniors. That doing their own research is important, not just hearing their friends' reviews on a college campus, because folks have different parameters and priorities. And so that came up as a theme. And then also to really try and do campus visits before you've got admission decisions, which I know is something we've talked about before. But in case you were thinking, I'm going to put this off a bit into senior year, there was some very specific advice about, feeling like there's one student in particular who'd looked at a lot of large schools, a lot of public institutions. Once he was in and went to go visit, he was really overwhelmed by those spaces, and he hadn't been in them before. And so then there was a whole sort of, how are we going to pivot from this? So starting early, doing your own research, and trying to get on some campuses were big themes. Students also have to do one more questionnaire for me. It's much shorter than what they did in the winter time, but know that that's on their plate. Maybe a quarter of the class have done it so far. And they're also asking professional community members to write letters of recommendation for them. So that's something they have to do before the school year is done. And I'm also discussing who the appropriate folks might be with your students and giving some advice. So know that all these parts are happening. I have a giant spreadsheet. I'm keeping track of who's meeting with me, who's on track. You don't have to try and monitor all of these pieces, but know that there is a lot of college stuff happening this month that we will try to wrap up for the most part by the end of the school year. So then they can take a break a bit in June, and then I will restart with a lot of reminders and things in July and August. So, while there's a lot happening with this process, it's important to consider the social emotional pieces of this. I did start the meeting yesterday by asking everyone to just take a deep breath with me, because while there is their own personal process happening, it's obviously all over the news. We cannot escape talk about college right now. And so I think it's a particularly great time to have our school counselor and director of advising, Julie, back with us this morning. And she also is someone who absorbs big feelings around this process, obviously, more currently with seniors, but certainly I think juniors are starting to speak with her about it as well. The process has a lot of vulnerability in it. It's a roller coaster of emotions. And she's going to just speak a little bit to how to care for your student, especially if this is the first time you've got a child going through the process. So I'm going to turn it over to Julie.
All right. Well, thank you, Lauren. It's nice to see you all. And I'm happy to join you for this. And I just, I'll start and end by saying that of course, I'm happy. I'm here to be a support to you for this session and also however needed as you're going through this process, college related or anything for that matter. I just want to run through some general thoughts and ideas that I like to share with parents of 11th graders as you're embarking on this process, either for the first time or again with another student. First of all, as Lauren said, there's a range of emotions that students will feel around this. And as you all know, teenagers and humans express themselves very differently. And so I do want to, however possible, I want to encourage you to meet your teen where they're at. Some of them want to talk about this all the time. And so you might have flourishing conversations at home. Some are really reluctant to discuss this. I actually think helping them find a middle ground of both would be a really good idea, because clearly talking about what comes after high school is inevitable and imperative. And so for students who really just can't handle the conversation, sort of gently helping them into it and saying, I know this is hard, it's overwhelming, and we're going to be okay. As parents, you can say, we're here to support you. This Ms. Cook is there, Ms. Beck is there, your advisor's there. There's a lot of supports for the ones who are reluctant, and they do need to delve into this topic. And Lauren, as she said, she meets with them. She's a great, she has those skills of helping the ones who want to talk a ton about it, sort of maybe calm it down, and the ones who don't, how to bring it out. And you can do that as parents as well, sort of finding the ins. And again, college is kind of like a lot of things. It might be those really late night conversations, or they only want to talk about it in the car, or when you have 100 other things to do. But follow their lead and find those moments where they're wanting to talk about it. If you do have a teen that is consumed with thinking about college, maybe helping them sort of bring that down and temper their anxiety around that. It's great to be excited, and it's also important for them to be present and focusing on what's happening in their current lives as well. And a reminder that sort of goes into my second point, which is just a reminder to them, but also for all of you, that there is a college and a meaningful future for everybody. And so Lauren, they'll work with Ms. Cook, and they will sort of figure out what's right for them. And as she said, what's one person's opinion is different. What's right for one person is going to be different for someone else. And so for parents, it's really, really important for you to remember there is a fit for your kid, and there is a wonderful future for them. It's really important for parents to not get caught up in the idea of the name or the reputation of a school, because sometimes that means you might overlook a really incredible fit for your particular teen. And so my one piece of advice really is keep an open mind, and remember there's a wealth of amazing schools out there. And maybe even school right away isn't the right fit for your team. Maybe a gap year program is a good idea. That's something Lauren can teach you about. I can certainly help you and your team process that. But really remembering that there is going to be a great path for your teenager. And knowing that you might not know it yet, and it might not be something you've already planned or have heard of, but it's going to be healthy for them. And in fact, I really want to encourage, I say this to the students all the time, I really want to encourage you to think about it's more important that your teenager is at a school or finds a future path that is a good, healthy fit for them and meets them where that they're at, then they're at a place where everyone's known the name that's more heard of, because I'm often telling students who really have these aspirations, they're like, well, everyone's heard of this school, I really need to get in there, but they're getting so stressed about the process of getting in there. And sometimes I'll say, if it's really important to think about, do you want a school that is going to cause you to feel this level of stress all the time? And so really gauging, um, you know, what do you need? How do you handle things? And what is the school that helps you with that versus a school that everyone's trying to get into that has sort of a big name. Big name schools are great. I don't want to suggest that's not the case. But I just think it's really important for everyone to keep an open mind to all the programs out there that might be wonderful for individuals, even if they're not already known to you yet. I also just want to encourage you as parents to check your own stress and anxiety. It's so overwhelming to get ready for your teen to move on, and to you want to protect them from this. You want to be sure that they have a great future. You want to be sure that they're checking all the boxes and doing everything they need to do. Sometimes parents can get overly anxious or overly stressed from this process, and that's understandable. So my recommendation there is, make sure you have your outlets to take care of yourself. Keep up with whatever works for you, your exercise, your time with your friends, your own forms of self-care. And remember that your teen can't hold your anxiety and stress. They're going to have their own. But I can. So feel free to call me if you need support at all. Lauren is a wealth of knowledge and will guide you through this process, and you'll have your scheduled meetings with her, and she'll be meeting with your students. And so we are here for you. And if you're feeling sort of untethered anxiety or stress, please email me or call. I will make time for you, and I can sort of help you take care of you so that you can then support your teenager. Because it makes sense if this feels overwhelming, both with where are they going to go and also the idea that they're graduating and moving to this next life stage. So while it's important for you to check your own stress and anxiety, it is also important for you to figure out really sort of practical and realistic ways to talk to your student about the college process, both about what they need to do and looking at schools, and also about finances. I will say that one of the biggest issues that comes up in my office which is a very human and natural issue, is the issue of, you know, can we afford this? Is this going to be, is this going to work out? And so I do want to encourage you to have realistic conversations with your teens, sort of throughout the process, just so that when the end time comes, if a school is somewhere, they really, really want to go, but financially it isn't actually going to work out, it might be important for them to know in advance that those are realistic things that you need to navigate. And so having conversations just keep sort of a reality on it, and reminding them that there's schools for everybody as well. There's all different schools for them. But finding a way to not create stress around finances, but also let them know if there are limits, which for many, many students at JCHS and elsewhere, there are. And so sort of finding realistic ways to talk about what's practical in your family, knowing that there's still a lot of options within the whole range of finances. And I'm sure you all know this, but Lauren, Ms. Cook will set you up with resources for financial support and webinars and experts that can help you navigate that as well. It is important for your teens to, like Ms. Cook said, it's important for you all to visit schools and get a vibe of like, oh yeah, I really like that giant school feeling. Oh, that's too big for me, and assess what feels right, and to visit schools. And my recommendation for parents is, when you're planning visits, however possible, if you can take on the logistics, the getting the hotel rooms or figuring out the flights or figuring out the dates, like your teens have a lot to hold and a lot to think about. So if it's good for them to look at the schools and research and say, yes, I want to look here, or no, I don't, or at least look at the list that Ms. Cook provides them, and maybe look at ones even they might not want to see. Whatever you can take off their plate when it comes to sort of planning and logistics and getting there, that's a great thing to do, while also making sure that in the process that they're the first person talking, that they're owning the, being the agents of their own future when it comes to taking the tours and talking to the people there. Behind the scenes work, if you can do that for them, that would be great. Um, and as I stood, I'm rambling, I'm saying, a lot of stuff, but the main points really I want to share are for you to check your own stress and anxiety so that then you can help your teens do that, for you to remember that they are going to have a thriving, wonderful future. To remember it can be a turbulent year, and that wherever they're at, if you're really concerned, if your teen is refusing to talk about anything at all, that's probably something that, and if we don't know that, please let us know. If you feel like they're talking or engaging too much around all of this, and you can't help them temper it down, again, let us know, let me know, and I will help you navigate that, as will your teen's advisor, Dean, Lauren Cook. And for you all to know, just sort of as a scaffolding and support, we're here for whatever you need. And so Lauren has all the knowledge you need for around the schools and around the process. I have time and space and energy to support you however you need when you're doing your parenting or when you're taking care of yourselves. I will meet with your teens. We care about you, we care about your teens through this process, and we know that in the end, there's going to be a lot of healthy, wonderful options for them. It's just going to take a lot of breathing and taking care of everybody during it. So we're here for you, and that's me rambling a lot and giving you a few little tips, but I'm also going to stick around for any thoughts or comments or questions.
Thank you so much, Julie. Lots of good things to think about. So we'll open it up here for questions, and they can be for Julie about anything she mentioned, for me, for both of us. And I will just name that, of course, there is just extra anxiety right now because of what's happening on college campuses. And I don't know that Julie and I are going to have any terrific new hot takes on it, but we can certainly process some of that. So Leslie, you've got your hand up, your Zoom hand up. Go for it. Nope, you can unmute yourself, Leslie.
Good morning, everyone. Hey, Ms. Cook, is there a reason to tour a college campus before you're admitted to that campus? I just want to take some notes on that.
Yep, absolutely. And I know that there are still some students in the bunch that may think, I don't need to do this yet. So they heard a counter narrative about that yesterday in the junior class meeting. But yes, absolutely. The biggest reason at this moment is if they have not fully built a list of priorities for themselves, this process has to start with the student. So for example, I have a lot of juniors coming in right now saying, Ms. Cook, how much do I need to worry about this anti-Semitism thing? It's a huge question. And I often turn it back around on them and say, well, let's talk about your thoughts on life in the Jewish community, what you need for support to support your identity, what you will want from your peer group, what activities you might want to engage in, and then think about and unpack what kind of educational home is going to have that for you, what type of social and cultural home is going to have that for you. And standing in the middle of a campus and getting a sense of the aesthetics. For example, some people go to UC Santa Cruz and they say, wow, it's in the middle of the woods. I was hearing Santa Cruz, was picturing a beach. I feel like I'm on whatever is that Ewok planet in Star Wars, right? And that's a surprise. Some of them say, wow, there are so many students here. This is a little much for me. And some say this feels like being at camp and I love it, right? So you can have a variety of different reactions just from standing in a space, seeing what the nature or the city feels like, seeing what the volume of students or the lack of volumes of students feels like. Same thing if you go to a small liberal arts college, that you might think, wow, this is a lot quieter than I thought it was going to be, or that this is perfect for me. It feels like JCHS, right? So they can't have those gut reactions until they've stood in the space. And while it can be great to go during the school year so that you can see other students, do some people watching, all of that, that's not always practical for places further from home. That going during the summer is the best time. That's okay too. But it really is important, if only to do a couple of types of schools. You don't have to see every school you're thinking about applying to, but going to a large public, going to a smaller private, going to something in an urban environment, something that's going to something that's a little more suburban or whatnot, just check out some types. And maybe your student thinks that they have their list of preferences. This was the case with one of the seniors that said, there's a certain type of program I want to do. I'm going to find that at schools that are large, that have big athletics. That's what I'm going to build my list on. I'm checking out who has the strong programs. You know, they were going by lots of things on the internet, but it wasn't until they stood in the middle of that campus, which unfortunately was after we'd done a lot of this process, that they said, oh, wait, there might have been this little flaw in my thinking in that there's too many people here. So it's really important to do a little bit of standing in that space.
Great. And just one more quick one.
Yeah.
We have twins. And what if hypothetically, Julie, Lauren, we have a foot dragger? What if someone is dragging their feet at what month in senior year?
Right.
How do we prod that person along? Do we do a timeline, a spreadsheet? At what point do we say, all right, Rick, we have to really move in and take over this process?
Right. Great question. I'll turn to Julie first and say, do you have any advice? As you've said, meeting students where they are, at what moment do you?
I mean, so on one level, like on a general answer, I'd say, you know, it's probably worth trying to figure out what's causing the foot dragging and why, you know, what some of that might be conversations with me or with Lauren or with advisor or something. And so some of that is actually just a personalized question. I'm happy to talk more specifically. And I think also, I mean, you did mention this, you're in a position where if you have twins, you might find that some of the visits, if you go together, might spark some inspiration for both of them. But I mean, Lauren will let you answer the specifics about like the schedule and when you have to do it. But for Leslie and for everybody, if you really are concerned that your teen is having a really hard time engaging, I think that's probably worth us talking and doing some planning about how do we engage with that person and sort of get to the root of what might be going on for them so that we can help them meet them where they're at and then help them move along.
Right. I will also say for now, as I mentioned earlier, I've got spreadsheets, I've got timelines. I am making sure each student is hitting the markers, which are not really bare minimum. There are, you know, some important markers, especially this month. And if I see someone falling behind, missing meetings with me, not getting something in the time that I need it, I will be following up with them. And I would say at this moment, let me be the heavy with things. So I will track them down during study hall. I will nag them via email. I will contact their advisor and say, okay, when you see them, pull them into your office and ask them, you know, what's happening with this so that you can be preserving your at-home relationship, right? You've got a year and a half potentially left with them at home if they will head off to a four-year college. I want to keep that as calm as possible until we all need to ramp it up a little bit. And there's one, you know, particular family where this past year I've gone back and forth. We keep having the conversation about at what moment do we save the student from themselves? Right? Where we let them continue to make their own decisions and see what the consequences of those are. And when do we step in and provide the safety net? And we're not in any of that place yet with juniors, right? So, but know that I'm very mindful of it. And let's keep the communication lines open. So as you have concerns or are seeing things at home, please just report those things with me, and I'm happy to be back channeling about what I'm seeing at school. And obviously Miss Beck and other folks are part of that team as well. So hopefully that helps. I'm going to do two things in the chat before we get to Susan. So there's a question about
Robert has his physical hand up as well. I've noticed that.
Great, perfect. All right. Well, yeah. So in the chat, Olga has said, should we keep the recommended column clean and devoted to the college advising recommendations, or can we parents also add recommendations? please add recommendations. The recommended column is there for us to just keep a running list, us meaning like you and me, of places that we're recommending for them. And the student following column is where they have editorial control. And so we can't add stuff there. So I will ultimately look at the following column for what's getting traction with the students. But you should feel free to put some stuff in there. I initially threw things at the wall, right, and want to see what sticks. But it's just the start of the conversation, and it's certainly not the end all be all on all of the colleges that your students should be considering. So please add stuff there as well. There's a question about, is it okay to wait until early fall to tour schools? Yes, absolutely. We will continue building their college list through, it's typically about October 1st that I ask that they have a pretty solid draft of where they think they're going to apply, but we can still be tinkering with that. And you don't have to have seen all of those schools or be sure about all of those schools. And we may drop one or two, we may add one or two as we get closer to deadlines. But we do have a fair number of days off school. A lot of the holidays this fall on weekdays. And so in October in particular, I think there are 2 or 3 4-day, we might even have a 5-day weekend at some point. So if you are comfortable utilizing those for some of your tours, that's absolutely fine. Robert, because you did have your hand up earlier, let's go to you and then we'll go to Susan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I was curious, given how many schools allow early action applications, as well as early decision, it seems advantageous to try to apply early to a number of places, but I'm curious, do colleges interpret ambivalence if you don't apply early action? Is there any, or if they have, are they aware that you're applying early action to 4 other schools, but not theirs? And is that a detriment?
Great questions. Generally, colleges do not know where else you're applying or how you are applying, under what application plans. I will say when you fill out the FAFSA, and that hasn't been the case this year because everything's been crazy with the FAFSA timeline. But generally, when you fill out the FAFSA, which is the federal student aid form, that is one place where they can see where else you are sending the FAFSA. Right. So that's really the only moment where a college might see other places you're applying, but they have no idea on the timeline for that. So that, and it's actually sort of admission illegal for like an interviewer to ask a student where else you're looking. If an admission officer does that, if you hear that from your child, let me know, because usually it's something I might ring up that school about. They're supposed to not be putting pressure on kids in that way. But in terms of application plans, I will say, if early action is an option, that's the non-binding one, where you just find out early. And if your child is organized enough, which we hope most are, to have things ready to go and submit some applications early, I think it never hurts to do that. But if you don't, you ask a good question, if you don't apply early action, the non-binding loose one, does that, indicate ambivalence? And I would say no, generally no. And colleges offer early action to spread out their work. Because if they were to receive all of their applications actually on one, general deadline, that is a lot, especially for the larger public institutions. So if they can spread things out, great. But that means they do want things to come in regular decision as well. And we have plenty of success with regular decision applications for students. It's not as if, everybody applying regular takes it on the chin. But there are certain places, because as with everything with college, it depends. There's no uniform rule for every single college. So let's say Tulane, that's a place that historically I'm finding cares very much about the fact that they offer early options. And in some years have literally said to our students, there's only and they're exaggerating a little bit, there's 6 places left by the time you get to regular decision. That's an exaggeration, but not by a lot. So if there are certain schools on your list or on your students list that care very much about some of those early indications, I will let you/them know that, right? To the best that I'm aware of it. And it is some very specific places, but know that yes, sometimes that comes up. That's the minority For the most part, they are really earnestly offering all of these options and want you to engage in what is, sort of developmentally best for you, research, best for you in terms of how you've learned about the school, interacted with it, and strategically best for you, which means some places you're going to decide to apply early decision and other ones you're not. You're going to apply regular. And that's just, how this all goes. So I hope that helps. But we will, as we get into the summer, I will start bringing up the word strategic, especially with your students that are looking at more highly selective, highly rejective places, thinking strategically about what are the application plans that are going to give them the best shot at admission and what that's going to mean for preparation and the work that we need to be doing in August and September to set them up to get those in that time. Susan, thank you for being so patient and waiting.
Hi, Julie. So I've got a couple of questions. First, it's around the interview. Some schools offer that voluntary interview. How important do you think it is for kids to take advantage of that? And then how much preparation needs to go into getting ready for that interview? Second question is around neurodivergent students and executive functioning skills. I know a lot of people in their freshman year of college try to get executive functioning coaches for their kids to help them with all the college stuff. Would you guys at JCHS spend time specifically focusing on that, or is that something as a family, we should outsource? In other words, how much prep can we do in senior year so that child is set up for success first year of college? And then my last question was around a school like Cal Poly, who wants you to declare a major right off the bat. Mm-hmm. And for somebody who has a general idea of which direction they want to go, like what advice do you give for kids that? Because I know for River touring that school, that immediately felt like a lot of pressure. Like, how do I declare a major right off the bat? So yeah, that's it now.
All right, so I'm going to take the first two and then ask Julie to say a little bit more about some of the neurodivergence and preparing for independent skills and all of that with college. But just in terms of prepping to do an interview and all of that, interfacing with all the adults as part of this process. We will do some prep for that as we get into the fall with the rising seniors. Everyone just got to save the date on August 12th for a bit of a boot camp that I have with the senior class. It is not required, but it is highly recommended. Some of you may not be back in town if you've been doing things during the summer, but if you are, your students should absolutely plan to come to school that day. And that is when some theater rehearsals start. Athletic practices will have already started then. I bring in a half dozen admission reps from different colleges. I'm just booking folks now. So I know USF will be there. Someone from Indiana University will be there, a wide range of schools, and they will practice interviewing with students. And it's a no stakes situation because these are probably not schools that they're applying to. And if they are, they can meet with one of the other reps, right? So this is literally practice making eye contact, practice answering extemporaneous questions. And I'm available to keep doing that as we go into the fall as well, if they're nervous about a particular school and how to get their mouth around why they're interested in it or whatnot. So I did thousands of interviews when I was a college rep. And so we will do, a full mock interview, call the scene and then talk about how it went and what they thought and what I think they can improve on. So know that we've got a couple of different resources for that. And then to your third question about majors, this came up yesterday in the junior class meeting, and I think this should be part of the priority list as they think about what's important for them in making their college list. And the Cal Poly, that's part of the California State University system, the CSUs, that is part of how their system works. You have to check off a box on the application indicating your intended major. And so for some students, that may mean the CSUs are not for you, Or CSUs where, so Cal Poly is one where, you know, it's highly selective, and what you put down, you may be pretty well not wedded to, but it's going to be a little trickier to change majors once you're a student because it's so competitive just to get in to begin with. Those might not be the right schools for you to apply to, right? And so this is part of the criteria you need to be thinking about. If you have an undecided student, if you have a student with a broad range of interests that wants to move between different departments, we might need to be looking at schools where it's more possible to do that. Now, the CSUs are kind of an extreme example of rigidity around that. And it doesn't mean you can't transfer a major once you're a student. It's just trickier than even a UC, certainly some of the liberal arts colleges, or other private universities that are just set up to be better structured for flexibility. So that's something to think about. And this whole idea of, do you have to know what you want to do right in this moment, came up yesterday. And I think the seniors were great around letting them know you don't. And even if you think you do, you're going to change, right? So trying to take some pressure off yourself around that. Now, to the neurodivergence question, which I think is useful for hopefully a lot of families. Julie, I don't know if you have thoughts around ways in which we're just working on the scaffolding for that during all of their years at JCHS and senior year in particular.
Yeah, I mean, so a couple thoughts I have are, first of all, I mean, particularly in senior year, I mean, you will all learn this, but we have academically, we have some big projects that come up during the year, specifically senior thesis in their Jewish thought class and the Keystone Project, which is a year-long project. And these are designed for all students to help them learn how to do a big research paper, that's the senior thesis, and how to do an independent project in any topic where they have to, and we scaffold it, and there's benchmarks that they have to do along the way. But a lot of that is designed for them to learn some of the skills that it takes to sustain independent work or to do a longer assignment or a big project. And so those are some examples of some of the tools that we actually are working very hard to teach while they're still our students. We also, I mean, for each student it's different, but a lot of our students do have individual relationships with members in our learning support and meet pretty often with them, and they will be continuing to work on specific executive functioning skills that work for that individual person is either working on or trying to access or utilize. So we do a fair amount of support here. I actually think it's one of the things I recommend, and Lauren, you can certainly comment on, you know, you might have more insight into this, but I think it's actually really important for students and families to learn what supports are like at the schools they're going to. I was actually talking to a senior yesterday who was really excited about the school that they chose, partially because they have so much support there. And they were talking about not only the social supports like the RAs and the dorms, but also the advisors that they'll have and the individualized support that the school offers. And so I do think, particularly if you know that you have a student that has a learning profile or a social emotional profile that where they really thrive with an additional type of support, or at least the resources there for it, it's going to be a really good idea to find out what the schools offer. And I just saw really quickly, the school that the student was talking about, actually I've had a couple of kids over the years say this, is University of Puget Sound, that it sounds like has a lot of really good supports. I've had students over the years say that. But I think so it's really important to check out what kind of supports the schools actually have. I do actually have students who, whether it's neurodivergent students or students that just have their own mental health needs, I do really recommend that students use time senior year, particularly while they're still at home, to get a little bit of extra support, whether that's you know, they see a therapist, or they have a tutor, or they have an executive functioning coach. I'm here to do that. You know, if depending on how much they need, we have our learning support for that. But if you have a teen who's either already doing that or you think could benefit from support outside of school, it's sometimes a good idea to do that before they moved away, because learning how to find those supports once you're moved away from home can be a little trickier. I also sort of, to diverge from this slightly, I tell all seniors when I meet with them during Senior Segue, I'm going to talk to seniors about this in a couple of weeks. I think it's really important for students to know what counseling is like at the schools they go to, because over the course of 4 years here, a majority of students see me 1 to many times over their 4 years. And just knowing who you can talk to, who you can turn to for academic or social emotional support at your school is really important. And so when I always tell students, before you even go to your campus, look it up, find out what counseling is like, find out learning support is like, find out what you would do if you do need support and where you would go and what the steps might be to put that in place so that you're not waiting until there's some kind of high intense need or a crisis or something to get that support. So that's sort of once you're going there, figuring out what you have. But when you're looking at schools, specifically, Susan, to your question, I really do think it's important to find out what they offer for students and how they help sustain executive functioning for students who have been working on that. But I don't know that anyone would need their own coach or to hire someone individualized. I don't want people to feel like that's essential. We can certainly help here. And again, I think, finding a school that's a good fit could help. But also similar to everything else, if there's really specific questions that people have, I'm also happy to talk actual specific to particular students separately. So that's a very vague answer. I don't know if it's helpful. I hope it's somewhat helpful. And then I'm sure Lauren can add.
Yeah, I'm going to just add on a couple of more specifics as relates to actually doing the search over the next couple of months and completing applications. The essay unit right now in English classes is actually a great moment for me to see a couple of things. One, how difficult it might be for some students to actually, I say pen to paper, but we all know it's fingertips to keyboard, to actually produce some writing, because for some of our neurodivergent students, that can be difficult. And then to see the quality of the writing and how much we're going to need to work on it together. We're going to need to push to get to the kind of reflective place it needs to be at. And if there is, just foot dragging and, around this and how much it takes to actually get something complete and in by the deadline. And so it is a great barometer for me to see a preview of what will happen in the fall. And if this is something where I feel like we're going to be able to work with the JCHS resources, meaning me and the learning support folks, or whether there really might be a need to also have someone who specializes in doing some of this learning support, adding more scaffolding around the college things that need to be produced. And then that's a layer that we can add during the summer or into the fall. And so I never want folks to feel like they have to access another person and spend more money on another resource. But some families want to do that to make sure that all of the markers are being hit as we see this kind of preview in the next few weeks of how it might go. So I do have a couple of like tutors, support folks that work on college essays and writing in particular that I can recommend to folks over the summer if we feel like that's a need. But that's a minority of the cases. I will also say that sometimes as we start going through this process the next few months, it becomes more clear that a gap year is going to be useful for a student before to have their most successful launch once they get to campus, whether that be living independently or understanding their learning needs and whatnot. And there are lots of gap programs. Obviously, we've talked about this, but there is a subset that also focus on executive functioning and really sort of building up those skills. So those are just programs for folks to be aware of as well. And again, this is very iterative. We just kind of see how things go and how we want, what's the best positioning to launch your student, and then make some decisions as we get later into senior year about the timeline. So Julie, I know you need to go, so I want to thank you.
It's nice to see you all. I gotta go spend some time with the 9th graders in our health and wellness class. But again, I mean, whether it's college related or anything at all, while your students are here, however I can be a support, please reach out to me and I will always make time for you. And I wish you all as much peace in this process as possible. And you are in amazing hands with Ms. Cook. We are really, really lucky to have her. So have a good morning, everybody.
Okay. I do want to note what Doug has put in the chat 15 minutes ago, just to make sure that folks are seeing, because I do want to touch a bit, and I do not have, big answers. And, I'm watching along with everything happening on college campuses like the rest of you. But I think he presents a very important reminder to us. So yes, Doug's hand is up. Have at it, Doug, if you've got more to say on what you put in the chat.
Well, first off, I'm just going to say it's actually Becky instead of Doug that
Oh,
wrote.
great.
Go ahead.
What? I wasn't gonna say, that's why I put a note
She
in.
just put the note in.
Yeah.
I actually had I had another question separate from that, but please do take what Becky put in the chat and think about that and take that into account.
Yeah, and I'm going to just say something really quick, and then I want to know what your question was, Doug, but that I do think this is an important point that has been coming up a lot in the listservs that I'm in for Jewish schools and Jewish student counselors, and there's Facebook groups and all sorts of things that you can turn to unpack what's happening on campuses right now. But I think as you are building lists, as you are researching schools, looking at what are the resources for Jewish students on campus, that is one of the most important questions. And while it is campuses that seem to have larger Jewish populations that seem to be more activated right now, that's not a reason to cross them off your list, right? That robust Hillel and Chabad options. Are there Jewish studies departments? Is it a major or minor? Is there study abroad? Is there, what are all of the options for Jewish students? And that's where I think you're going to find the supports in a way for your child. So I don't know if you have more to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add, like, I know that the ADL put out this report card, which I think some in the community blasted. But my understanding is, for example, that Hillels were not even consulted. And so there's sort of or at least not fully. And so the perception often is, what the administrations on campuses are doing, or what the level of unrest is, as opposed to sort of what the community and resources are that bolster students on campus, and all of their efforts, even in negotiation with administrations, and sort of what progress has been made, because they can't fully control what happens on the ground, but they can control how they respond to it. And I don't think those report cards fully took all that into account. So I wouldn't be freaked out by those sort of, and immediately cross them off your list. But I do think it's important to talk to students, talk to Hillel directors. If, students also have the more religious interests, there are also Chabad, but like looking at the whole set of resources, as well as like we're an academic resource at Berkeley, but we also do a lot behind the scenes that's extracurricular with students. So just knowing what all the Jewish support resources are on a campus and how they work together and how students respond to them kind of should fill out your picture of it, and not just what you see in the media.
And I always, as we have colleges come to visit us in the fall, and they will start booking those appointments sooner than I'm prepared for, I always send out some visit information to them, and some of them is pragmatic about, how to park at JCHS. But I've also always had statements on it around, we are obviously a Jewish school, and here are the things I want you to be prepared to talk about. There's a lot of conversation in my Jewish high school listservs about how detailed and pointed to get in those instructions for this coming year. And I'm trying to decide how detailed and pointed I want to be, because I don't want to turn folks off from visiting JCHS if they feel like they are going to get the full third degree from our students. But I want them to have answers to some of the questions that may be coming up once we hit September, October, and your students are getting serious about where to apply. Okay, so Doug, did you have other questions or unrelated?
I did have totally unrelated questions, and they're even sort of unrelated to each other, but I have two questions. One is if you have any idea when they will open up signups for the ACTs that are offered in the fall, or SAT ACTs that are offered in the fall. That's the first question.
What a great question, and how I wish I knew. I actually saw that the SAT signups, which I think I emailed all your students about on Tuesday or Wednesday. I saw on like Facebook that it was open before College Board emailed all the high schools to say it was open. That happened a full 24 hours later. So the SAT signups have opened for the
Okay.
fall. I have heard there's already some issues finding places, but as I said in my email to your students, we will offer one sitting of the SAT at JCHS on PSAT day, and Ms. Bregman will send more information about that on Monday for
Okay.
how your students can sign up for that if they are choosing the SAT. The ACT does not appear to be open yet for the fall. I sadly have no idea when it's going to open. Last year, they opened it in April. So I do feel like it's any day now.
Okay.
And as soon as I see any sign that it is open, I will blast everyone with a message. So
Great.
with great
Perfect.
apologies, but this is the testing company's.
No, just thought I would ask. And then the other one, I'm sure you probably can't answer, but I'll ask it anyways. You mentioned about how many problems FAFSA has had this year. Have you heard anything about whether those will be fixed for next year, or should we expect the same insanity next year? What have you heard?
So what I'm hearing, and I will say, I know I've been sending things about our college money method webinars. Obviously, as we lock into senior year for all of you, it will be even more important that you're paying attention to what Paul is doing for us, because Paul is on a minute by minute sort of staying on top of what's happening with all of this. So I do think there will continue to be some problems with FAFSA next fall. I think they will be radically reduced from what we've been experiencing this year. So because the form was being so incredibly changed and revitalized and reduced this year, that the bulk of the issues are being worked out right now. But I think they're going to be continuing to tinker with it, right? So I don't think it's going to be a normal year next year, but I think it will be closer to normal. I think it should open up in the middle of the fall, as it typically has done. I do think some families will still experience some issues, but the biggest issues right now that still seem a bit unresolved are around undocumented families. And so folks without social security numbers. So if that is, and that it's been around, a parent specifically. So if that is an issue for any of our families, I will work individually with folks, but writ large, I think most of you will have an easier experience, but Paul's going to stay on top of keeping us updated. Yeah.
What have you heard, just as a last follow-up, and then I'll stop. What have you heard as for current seniors? Did they have enough? Was there enough information from FAFSA that they got financial knowledge before they had to declare May 1st where they were going? Did they have at least enough of a financial picture that they received back?
Yeah, it's probably useful to give you just a snapshot of what's happening right now. So it is May 10th. Typically, May 1st would be the date by which folks need to respond and commit to a college. Because there has not been financial data for everyone, I still have a couple of seniors right now that do not have processed FAFSAs with some institutions. Those deadlines were extended. So it's May 15th for UCs and CSUs this year. And some other institutions have gone as far as June 1. The vast majority of our seniors have committed somewhere. So we do have, well, I can't do the math backwards, but I know there's about 12 students that have not fully committed. Most of them have a sense of where they're going, and many of them actually have financial data, but it's about the fact that they had that longer runway. Some are visiting places this weekend. So they're really pushing it to that 15th deadline. What has happened is the CSS profile, which is the second form a lot of places ask for, it's mostly private institutions. Any school that asked for a CSS profile got those pieces of information and packages out in a timely fashion. And the CSS profile is more detailed than the FAFSA. And so in most cases, it's been very accurate as to that being like the estimated package. Once the FAFSA data was processed, there wasn't much difference there. So that's why most students were able to go ahead and make a commitment. And not to put them on blast, but it's actually been Syracuse University right now with a couple of students that has not processed the FAFSA, but have sent out a CSS profile. And so we're waiting, like every day, it's sort of like, have you heard something? And there's been, to be fair, 1 or 2 UCs where we also have not had FAFSA data out. but it's where, if that profile was also offered, that students have felt comfortable going ahead and making their commitments. Again, my hope is that we will not, and I know colleges are certainly hoping we won't be dealing with this on this scale at this time next year. But if the FAFSA information, if packages have not been sent out, everyone's giving extensions because everybody understands they're all in the same boat right now, right? And so for the most part, colleges have been very generous, even if one college has sent a package out, letting a student wait and see what the package is from another institution before saying, you know, your offer is no longer good. And there's actually been a large amount of waitlist activity this year, which feels unusual and maybe related to the financial situation.
Thank you.
All right, knowing we have 4 minutes left, I want to get to Noah, who's patiently had her Zoom hand up.
I'm going to speak really fast. Hi, everybody. Good to see you. Thank you, Lauren and Julie and everyone. I just want to say a small little, first of all, thank you. But also, if you find out that any of your reps that you're inviting are deterred because of our Jewishness, please let us know, or at least please let me know, because for us, it's a big factor. I think it's a wonderful way to know who's not going to make us feel comfortable in this journey at this time. So just plugging that in there, please. A personal request for me, I don't want to speak on behalf of all Jews of the world, but the Beharavs would like to know about that. Thank you.
Sure. And I do want to just clarify by saying it would never, well, one can never say never at this point, but it would rarely be about the Jewish element of it all. And in fact, I'm watching a lot of places bend over backwards to try and make sure we are understanding how welcome our students are on their campuses. And I've had a lot of personal back and forth with various folks at admission offices at a lot of places you're seeing on the news who are really pressed about how this is all playing out and how it is going to impact Jewish students feeling like they want to be on their campuses, but really about how explicitly I want in my communication as someone is thinking about booking a visit with us to say, you should be a member of Mothers Against Anti-Semitism on Facebook and go look and see what's being said about your institution, because our students and families will ask questions about it, right? Like, how pointed do I want to be that they understand, you know, how intense the conversations are in our communities? Because I don't want, it's not an individual college admission rep's, you know, responsibility to sort of defend their president. We all have our own personal feelings about this and reactions, and we personally might do something differently. But I do want them to be prepared, and as much as they can run it up the flagpole at their institution to say, this is what I'm hearing from my schools. This is what they're saying we need to be prepared for, you know, for the people that are in the positions of power to be setting policy, making reactions, speaking to the media, that they understand how important they need to get it right with our communities, right? So that's what I mean by that. I want to make sure I'm clear. But yes, I am, and I'll probably put this as the last comment before we log off, that I am going to be doing a lot of thinking and planning over the summer about how our students feel comfortable or not bringing their full selves to their applications, because there are going to be a lot of questions on these applications, as there always are, about, are there pieces of your identity that are important to you? You know, how have you, you know, felt supported, challenged, affirmed in, you know, your identity, and how will you bring that to our campus? How are they going to approach those questions? Are they going to feel comfortable approaching those questions? And are there certain schools that we might need to decide are maybe not best for your individual student based on what they might be asking in the application? So I think we're all going to have to approach some of these things more mindfully. And if talking about Israel or your Jewish identity is going to be a problem for a certain admission office, to take note of that, and knowing that that's not a school to have on your students list. So these are always conversations we want to have, but I think they're more heightened now, obviously, than they've ever been. So those are questions that we'll have to leave us with. And thank you all for hanging in there. It is 9 o'clock. Shabbat Shalom. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. And remember that I work all summer. So I will have appointments available to you. I will be on email. I will be taking vacation. I very much need it. But the conversation does not end with the end of the school year. So have a good weekend. Have a good month. And I'll see you online.